It has been a journey. It's kind of crazy to me when you look at the various films that have come out in the world, the various films that have received not only one, but two, three, four, five, seven sequels. It's crazy to me that you can have a franchise like the Jaws franchise that started off with a film that is easily one of the biggest films of all time, one of the most influential films of all time, made by one of the greatest to ever make films. And you can end with a movie like this. Let's get into this. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and I'm very happy to be wrapping up the Jaws series that we started a little over a year ago here on this channel and slowly have been making our way through. Joining me today once again is my buddy D Movieman, who has joined me for each and every one of these installments as we have gone from one of the greatest films of all time, one of the most iconic shark films, the film that completely terrified the entire world of sharks. We are finally wrapping this up now to talk about one of the worst films that's ever been made about sharks, but undoubtedly a film that is worth talking about. And that film today is Jaws: The Revenge. Let's take a trip back to 1987 for a film directed by Joseph Sargent and written by Michael de Guzman, who in this film once again stars people like Lorraine, but also has a bunch of other people in here like Lance Guest and Michael Caine, Judith Barcy, Mitchell Anderson, and many, many more. And before we get too far into this, as I mentioned, I want to say a big thanks to D Movieman for joining me in this entire series, and now we're wrapping it up with Jaws: The Revenge, the fourth film in the franchise. You guys can go over down below to his channel in the description box. There's a link there. Go give him some love. Let him know I sent you. He's got tons of great movie related and TV related content over there where he does deep dives into various episodes of television as well as movies just like this one. It's been a pleasure having him here on the channel, as it usually is, and I'm looking forward to finally wrapping up this series and talking about not sharks in the future. Before we go ahead and throw it on over to my buddy D Movieman though in a moment, I do just want to talk about what this movie is all about, because this one probably has the most ridiculous premise out of all of them, which is kind of crazy to say. The original film is an iconic film that mostly focuses on humans. It is a narrative that's driven by the humans and the fact that there is some sort of threat in the water that they believe to be a shark, which of course we know it is a shark. And the shark isn't seen for majority of the film, with the film really relying on tension and what lies beneath being the creepy element. You also have great performances, great monologues, great dialogue, and an overall very well created film with an iconic score given to us by John Williams. Then you end up getting that sequel where John Williams and Steven Spielberg had already left the franchise, but even though it's not a great movie, it just feels like a run-of-the-mill, straight-to-video sequel of a shark kind of movie. That's pretty much what that movie feels like in terms of the greatness of the first one to the second one. It's not great, but it's not the worst thing that this franchise has put out. Then you have the third film where we take place in SeaWorld, which still is a mind-boggling thing to me that SeaWorld would say, yeah, our aquarium should definitely allow a movie to be made where one of the creatures in the aquarium is killing people. The idea of any aquarium or zoo even signing on to that today is absolutely mind-boggling in and of itself. And that film is filled with terrible visual effects, as it was meant to be a 3D installment in the franchise, and it's just overall a poorly made movie, but I would argue is definitely a it's so bad it's good kind of movie. There were moments in that film that had me rolling with laughter going back and revisiting it. And I'm happy to say to an extent that now with the fourth film in this franchise, Jaws: The Revenge, it's kind of similar. It is definitely an it's so bad it's good movie, but it is certainly, without any shadow of a doubt, a bad movie. The tagline for this film is, "This time it's personal." The base premise of the film is we jump straight into this movie and we're focusing on Ellen Brody, the wife of obviously Captain Brody from the original film, who was played by Roy Scheider, who did not return for this film and is killed off screen via a heart attack. When their youngest son, who is now a police officer, Sean Brody, played by Mitchell Anderson, ends up being killed by a shark, Ellen Brody is now under the impression that the sharks have been following her family. The shark is coming for her family, even though her husband died of a heart attack and killed 2 of the sharks that were killed in the other films. All of the sharks in each and every single one of these films has been killed in some way or another, whether it be an explosion or electrocution. There hasn't been anything left of these sharks when you look at the other films. And so the notion that these sharks are following her family in and of itself is incredibly silly. Because the son, Sean, has now passed away, the eldest son, who was one of the main characters of the 3rd film, played by Lance Guest, Michael Brody, comes to town, of course, for the funeral and says, "Hey, Mom, you should come back to where we live. We live in the Bahamas." He is working as a scientist and studying various snails and different creatures that are in the ocean in the Bahamas. She at first is like, "I don't want you in the water. I don't even want to go anywhere that's near the water. Why would I want to come to the Bahamas?" Well, he ends up giving her some peace of mind by letting her know that the water out there is warm, that there won't be sharks in the water there, and pretty much tells her, "Hey, you need to get out of Amity Island with everything that's gone on, with the death of her son. Come spend some time with your family in the Bahamas, get your mind off of things." And so she does. She ends up going there. And this shark ends up following them from all the way over in Amity Island, over 1,000 miles, and travels to the Bahamas in just a couple of days to kill Ellen Brody and the rest of her family. That is the premise of this film. The tagline of this film is, "This time it's personal." And the notion that we have a shark movie in the Jaws franchise where a random shark that is not tied to the other sharks from their films is now following this family that we have been following over the course of the other films is ridiculous. And then just to make matters even more hilarious, you have Ellen Brody kind of having a bit of a telepathic link to this shark, where there's a moment in this film that she steps into the water at the beach, just her feet, and senses that the shark is in the water. This is a ridiculous movie with a ridiculous premise that takes what was an iconic film with the first Jaws film that sure has some dated elements for sure, and absolutely just squanders anything that had any sort of potential with this franchise. With all that said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to my buddy, D Movieman. He's going to give us his full thoughts, pros, cons, talk about the movie a little bit more, give you guys some fun facts, and then we'll get back to my final thoughts on the movie to wrap it up.
Hey everyone, this is D Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And at last, I have reached the end of my review collaboration with the one and only Anthony A. Perez. It's been, quite the journey. But now we are officially bringing that journey to its conclusion with Jaws, The Revenge. This time, it's personal. Directed by Joseph Sargent and starring Lorraine Gary, Lance Guest, Mario Van Peebles, and Michael Caine. So, I'm going to start off with the pros. What I have to say may actually surprise you. So the first thing I have to mention immediately, because it really helped my experience immensely, is the cinematography and shooting location. Although we do get a little bit of story involving Amity Island, the majority of the film takes place and is shot in the Bahamas. Now, the style here is not spectacular, but let's be honest, having the Bahamas as a backdrop, the island, the water, the culture, like all of that, I mean, my eyes were not unhappy with the visuals I was seeing. And I think what was most significant is that it was leaps and bounds so far removed from the cinematic visual atrocity that was Jaws 3, aka Jaws 3D. That film was ugh. So I think just in contrast, just something that is tolerable at least would be fine. But I do think that the Bahamas backdrop just gives it something, gives it a little bit of life. It's something totally different. It's not Amity Island. It's not, SeaWorld. It's something that's completely outside of the realm of, the environments that we've seen. And I did appreciate that. And ironically, much like Jaws 3, this film does feature plenty of actors and actresses that I grew up watching in the 90s, throughout childhood and beyond. And it just was something so, heartwarming and special about being able to see them in this film as these various characters. I didn't realize this initially, but I am actually familiar with Lance Guest because he played Cosmo Cola in Stepsister from Planet Weird. Oh my gosh, those like late 90s, early 2000s Disney Channel original movies, unparalleled. Like, if you weren't there, I don't know what to tell you, but oh my gosh, like the fondest memories I have. And I don't think there was a film that came out during that time that I didn't love. Of course, I have my favorites, but yeah. And Stepsister from Planet Weird was a pretty solid one. Very bizarre premise, but it worked. Of course, I was very familiar with Mario Van Peebles. My introduction to him was New Jack City and Posse. And I also thought it was so cool seeing his father, Melvin Van Peebles, have a role in this film as well. And of course, I was very familiar with him as a very prolific actor, writer, filmmaker, and composer. We also have Lynn Whitfield, who I've been a fan of since I was very, very young, because of her roles in A Thin Line Between Love and Hate and Eve's Bayou. And lastly, my introduction to the Michael Caine was in none other than The Muppets Christmas Carol. And as I said before, it's just like, even with the shenanigans and the foolishness and all that's going on, it just is something special. Whenever you see actors that you've grown up with and you've had these very special memories of in certain films and in certain roles. So that was something that definitely enhanced the experience as well. And lastly, to close out this section, I just wanted to reference a part of the film that was very bittersweet. I wanted to take the time to mention Judith Barcy, who plays Ellen's granddaughter. Some of you may not be familiar with her, but I know her well because of her role in The Land Before Time, where she did the voice acting for Ducky. And Ducky was such a memorable part, easily kind of the breakout star of that film. And then she also voiced Anne-Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven. And, she was really, at the beginning of her career. And I find it just unfortunate sometimes how you can have these people who have this significant impact on your life. Like, you have these memories because of the roles that these actors take on, like I just mentioned. But sometimes that happiness and that appreciation and all the nostalgia, that isn't always reflected in the life of that person. And while I won't go into details, I will simply say that Judith's life did not turn out the way it should have. I wish she was given the opportunity to just go forward in life and for people to see more of her talent, and see her shine and do so much more. And I'm always grateful, like I said, for those memories. But it was tough seeing her. It was made me happy in one sense, but knowing what followed, it was a little bit of a dark cloud. But I have to say that I am very, very thankful for the impact that she did make while she was here, for the short time she was here. And in the end, I just think she deserves so much more. So much more. All right, now I'm going to jump over to the cons. I mean, must I say it? There comes a point in almost every film franchise where one or more of the creators basically says,
at the end of the day, I don't give a f. Okay, let's be clear.
Listen, this won't be the first franchise to suffer from the law of diminishing returns, but
oh my God.
One of the biggest issues I have with Jaws: The Revenge is something that could have easily been rectified, fixed, or in other words, removed completely, and that's its premise and story. Look, a shark story is a shark story, and I do think there are ways to expound upon that, although it's a very simple premise. However, this whole concept of this shark or multiple sharks, because I'm like, clearly there are sharks being killed and somehow these mysterious, I don't know, ghost sharks, like shark descendants, I don't know. But somehow these sharks keep rising from wherever to stalk and hunt down the Brody family. And that's ridiculous enough, right? We are already suspending our disbelief for this. But then this shark takes it to the extreme and decides it's going to swim 1,250 miles from the northeastern coast of the United States all the way to the Bahamas in 3 days to follow the same family. Why? Why? Can anyone tell me? Oh, but that's not it. Let's also have these weird scenes where Ellen Brody seems to have some kind of sixth sense or almost psychic connection with the shark, so that when someone is in danger, someone is about to get attacked by the shark, or someone is being attacked by the shark, she has like this like, I was just like, what is going on? Isn't the idea of being trapped in the water with some deadly unseen force not enough? And if it's not enough, is it not possible to expand on that idea in a way that is not completely bizarre and nonsensical?
Hell no! So let's talk about it!
After all, this film goes so far as to have a shark, a creature that has no vocal cords present in any part of its body, roaring like a dinosaur. And come to find out, said roar is actually a soundbite from a Tom and Jerry cartoon. Easily the worst part of this film, and I know I was like, can there be something? Yes, like the production side of things in this film, when I say that nobody gave two about what was going on, that is not an understatement. Wait. The final nail in the coffin is the creator saying, you know what? We don't have any more money. We're tired. We want to go home. So you know what we're going to do for this very last scene, for the epic, climactic, death of this shark? Let's get a toy shark and a toy model of a ship, and let's blow it up. And to top it off, let's reuse the same exact footage from the ending of the first Jaws film to showcase the death of said shark. That's a wrap, everyone. So, I'm going to give Jaws the Revenge a D-. I really have to stop laughing. Look, there's just no getting around what an absolute catastrophe this film is. And it is so not surprising that this was the effective end of the Jaws franchise and still is to this day. And it's a real shame. I mean, it really is a shame. Like, I can laugh about it, but it's kind of like, considering the brilliance, of that first film, it's just like, we went from that and we just like nosedived completely. It just shows you once again, like, when money, the dollar bill, y'all, when that's at the forefront of making films, you get dreck like this. And it's really unfortunate. They do say that all's well that ends well. But clearly, that does not apply to this film or this franchise. So instead, I will use another popular saying. If it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
Affleck.
If it creaks and groans like a 12-year-old rusty shark animatronic, it probably needs to be thrown away. Shout out once again to the one and only Anthony A. Perez. I appreciate your support and your patience as we have navigated this rather unpredictable film franchise. Hopefully, in the future, we will have the opportunity to collaborate on films that are far less emotionally, mentally, and physically taxing. But knowing you,
We are Venom.
I know that's asking for far too much. So, once again, this is D, Movieman, signing off, and I'll see you with the movies.
A big thanks to D Movie Man for joining me here in yet another video. Always a pleasure to have you on, my friend, and it is a pleasure to be wrapping up this very, very mixed bag of shark movies. Again, you have one of the greatest films starting this off, leading us to some of the worst shark films ever made with the later installments in this franchise. It was amazing to hear all your thoughts on the movie and all the various fun facts and different things you brought to the table. Always appreciate how thorough you are, and I'm just so happy that I chose to have you on for this franchise, and I do also look forward to talking about much better movies as time goes on. I think I owe it to not only you, but our viewers to be talking together about films that are just even slightly better. And I will remember the fact that you added that old clip of me from the early days of my YouTube there at the end of your clip. It was rather hurtful, and I'm going to cry about it tonight. But a big thanks to D Movie Man for joining me. Always a pleasure to have him on, as I mentioned. You guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box, so go give him some love. Let him know I sent you. And let's get into the rest of my thoughts here. There's some things I definitely want to reference that D Movie Man was talking about. And one of those things for sure is the young daughter played in this movie by Judith Barcy, who's the daughter of Michael Brody. He mentioned that unfortunately her life came to an end much, much too soon. And similar to him, I'm not going to get into it here with detail, but if you're interested in finding out the true story of Judith Barcy and how her life came to an end, I'm sure you can find that online. I also spoke about it in my The Land Before Time video, as I've slowly been covering every single film in that franchise with just a few more to go. There's 14 altogether, and unfortunately she was only around to actually star in the original film, setting the entire precedent and tone of who Ducky is in that original film. It is always a shame to see her in something and know that she unfortunately had her career cut short. And she is a cute part of this movie. I don't really have anything to say negatively about her, but I did want to reference her, as I have been actually covering the Land Before Time series and did speak on her and her tragedy in the film review that I did for the first Land Before Time. Another actor that he actually spoke about here is Mario Van Peebles, who is an actor that is very, very well known for a lot of people. I actually reviewed the film Badass over on my buddy Rashad G Reviews channel that he's in, where he plays his own father, who of course is one of the most prolific actors, especially in black cinema. And so, I was kind of excited to see him in this movie because I forgot that he was in this movie. But unfortunately, as the character of Jake, he gives one of the worst Bahamian accents I think I've ever heard in any single movie ever. The accent he has throughout the course of this film is laughable, with him consistently breaking out of this Bahamian accent into an American accent, and it made me laugh throughout the entirety of the runtime.
You hearing anything?
Nothing at all. Just another cool, calm, tickly day in the Bahamas. Just stay within a quarter mile. I got a 3-mile radius on the monitor. You come within 3 miles, we should have plenty of time to beam your ugly ass up.
And beyond him, another character that was in here that surprised me that I completely forgot was in this movie is the character of Hoagie, played by Michael Caine, who was a much younger man and at this point was already, pretty prominent in his life in terms of his career. And it's funny because my fiance and I were doing a little bit of reading on it last night, and she pulled up an article with him specifically saying that the only reason he chose to do this was because of the paycheck, and that it wasn't too bad of a paycheck for such a flop movie. He also mentioned that he's never seen this movie, which probably a wise choice, Michael Caine. And he obviously chose to do this because they gave him a big paycheck to come and do this movie, which was a little bit over $1 million, which back in the 80s was pretty good money. But this film primarily focuses on Lorraine Gary as Ellen Brody and her son Michael Brody, played by Lance Guest. And for the most part, I think their performances are fine in this movie. They are, I guess you could say, legacy characters for this franchise, most notably Lorraine Gary playing Ellen. And I just don't really think that the script does them any favors here. Like, there are times where you can definitely tell that these actors are trying to give the film something, but ultimately the premise is just so bizarre. The idea that Ellen Brody is just having these telepathic links to the shark, the idea that she is, even thinking that the sharks that have all been destroyed in previous installments are somehow following her family is just bizarre. And at times it almost feels like Lorraine Gary doesn't fully believe the script that she's been given, and she just is kind of put in a situation where she's being paid a paycheck to do this and to act like that is exactly what's happening, when ultimately we as an audience are just looking at the screen going, how is anybody believing this to even be real, like within the movie itself? The only person who tends to have any sort of logic in this movie is the character of Hoagie, played by Michael Caine. And ultimately, he is also an idiot as well. At one point, flying a plane straight into the water that's not a water plane in any way, shape, or form, sinking the ship. He did it to save Lorraine Gary's character, Ellen Brody, but it doesn't really make sense. There's a giant shark in the water that's killing everybody, so let's crash a plane into the water and let it sink, and now we have to swim in this water that has this murderous shark in it. And as you can see from the stuff that Movieman was showing us in there in terms of the animatronic roaring and the fact that they use like a toy shark at the end with a toy model ship and explode it to finish up the film, it just really genuinely felt like at a certain point they didn't know what they were doing with this movie. They didn't care. It just felt like what even were they thinking in the room where they were writing this movie? Like, it just blows my mind. And then there's stuff like the character of Jake, who we saw get murdered, where Movieman just showed us. He gets just completely obliterated by the shark, dragged down into the water, and then just shows up later on and he's fine. He just floats up to the top of the water. You can't make this stuff up. You really can't. Jaws: The Revenge, the fourth installment, and unfortunately the final, unfortunate but also fortunate installment of the Jaws franchise is, it's a movie. It's a movie that exists and unfortunately just taints everything that the franchise had any possibility to be. But unfortunately, it's not the worst in the franchise, depending on your taste. The third one is pretty terrible. This one was also pretty terrible. I almost feel like maybe I enjoyed the third film a little bit more because of how stupid it is at times and how dumb some of those 3D effects are. But yeah, it's pretty bad here. The animatronic is not nearly as scary as it was in the first film or other films in the franchise. There is one sequence where Michael Brody is swimming through a sunken ship and the shark is following him. That, as somebody who is terrified of sharks, was a little bit creepy and eerie to see. I do have submechanophobia, where I am afraid of man-made things in the water. So the idea of an animatronic in the water terrifies me, even though the shark looks goofy at times. If I was in the water with that thing, I would be having a heart attack. So there are times in this movie with some of the shots of the shark underwater, for somebody who has submechanophobia, that was pretty creepy. I won't lie. As somebody who, if I was in the bottom of that ship and there was an animatronic shark like that and I was the actor in that sequence, there wouldn't really be much acting going on and there would probably have been a lot of brown in the water, if you catch my drift. All in all, Jaws: The Revenge is not a great movie in any way, shape, or form, but there was plenty of fun to be had in just how ridiculous it was. This film stars some actors who have done some of the greatest things in cinema, but ultimately none of that is shown here, as the script, the dialogue, and the overall performances leave a lot to be desired. I wonder what Steven Spielberg thinks of these films at times, if he ever just sits down at night and just thinks about what that franchise became. A lot of times I oftentimes wish that what of these movies would have become if Steven Spielberg had directed maybe even the second or third film. I would have loved to have seen what this film franchise could have become if Steven Spielberg and John Williams had stuck around. As far as the musical score here, of course, they reprise things like John Williams' music, but have some new musical scores that are added throughout the course of the film that ultimately I thought were probably one of the better things about this movie. But with all that said, I'm going to wrap up this video now. A big thanks to Movieman for joining me, and a big thanks to you guys. If you got this far into the video, I appreciate the support. I'm sure the two of us do. Again, go give Movieman some love, and let us know down below, do you like Jaws the Revenge? Do you not like Jaws the Revenge? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.